It's Shelley here, and every Wednesday morning I do a live watercolor demo. Last week we started with this Trillium, and we got most of the way through, but we still have a number of things that we need to finish up here. So I'm going to talk about the finishing up of this one. And here's where we left off. We got a lot of the shading done on the Trillium, but we didn't get all of the shading done on all of the leaves and the stamen in the center and all of that sort of thing. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here to catch the palette as well. So I've got, I'm working on Arches 140-pound cold press paper. My sheet is approximately 13 by 13. I'm going to end up with a 12 by 12 for this particular project. I'm using mostly Da Vinci watercolors, and I have I believe it's a number 8 squirrel hair brush. So that's mainly what I'm using for most of this. And I'm going to be talking a lot about brush control and water control. So hopefully you can all hear me well. I know every once in a while somebody says they can't hear me, so let me know that you can hear me fine. I don't have all of my cameras operating today. We've had a little bit of an issue with the fuse box, so I've got like extension cords all over my studio trying to just to get my computer going and everything. But all right, so what I want to do here is I want to continue on with some of the shading that I was doing on the leaves and things. So I'm going to be using a little bit of cobalt, some cerulean blue, and aureolin. And that's going to make my green, which you can see is a pretty bright green. But if I want to dull that down, I can add a number of things. I can add neutral tint. I could add Payne's Gray. I'm going to be adding some alizarin crimson. This one's a permanent alizarin crimson, which is not fugitive like the original alizarin crimson. So adding a little bit of that, it gives me a much darker color. I'm going to add some more cobalt in here. And you can see that gives me a much darker green. A little duller as well. So we did the sepals. I learned that those are called sepals last week. So I'm going to be coming along, and the Trillium leaves are kind of funny. They're roughly a little bit like spinach leaves. Okay, so spinach leaves have these sort of puffy bits to them. So I'm going to be thinking about that. So I'm putting down, I've really loaded up my brush, and I'm putting down the main crease in the leaf, and I'm rinsing my brush. With the rinsed and blotted brush, I'm going to come along and hit that edge so that softens. So that gives me one crisp edge and one hard edge. Now I'm going to zoom in. Now that you've seen my mixing and everything, I'm going to zoom in as I do the next one so that you can see that a little better. I'm not really too fond of how this abruptly stops, so I'm going to use my dampened blotted brush, and I'm going to soften that a little bit. I think I'd actually like to have my paint a little darker. I could add some neutral tint into this. That would certainly get me darker a little bit faster. And gosh, it's hard to believe we are almost at the end of May. Where has this month gone? So I'm going to come into the next vein, I guess, in the leaf. And I'm always looking, which side of this line does this shadow fall upon? So in this case, it's above the line. And you'll notice as I paint these things that I am also not painting a razor thin line as well. I'm putting down lots of color so that when I come in with my blotted brush, I can soften that out. And you may have noticed that I took my blotted brush and I kind of made a ghost, like I did like a practice run. It's not actually a practice run. What that is I'm dampening a little further out from where I applied the paint. And that will ensure that I will have a softened line that doesn't create a new line because it's reached the end of where it's damp. So if you need to make it a bit darker, you can drop in a bit of color and that will just slowly dissipate into the damp area. And if it goes too far, you can blot your brush and get it back under control. And as I'm painting with this natural hair brush, you can see it's bent, but it is blotted, you know, as I blotted it, it bent it. And I am using a really, really light touch. It's almost as if I'm painting with a feather. So I'm going to continue on a little bit faster now as I come down and apply all of these creases in the leaves. Doing two at a time here. Blot my brush. All right. I'm going to put maybe just a little bit more right here. I'm going to put a little bit of that neutral tint into this. I just want to get it a little bit deeper crease, a little bit deeper color. I'll maybe come in and reinforce those a bit. If I get a little bit more color in there, it will feel like a deeper crease. That blotting of the brush, so important. It's amazing how many things we do as painters sort of subconsciously or unconsciously, I should say, because you're not always thinking, oh, how much water's in my brush? But if you become aware of it, this paper towel can be like your best friend. So I don't know how to get it on screen without actually putting it on my painting. So I can slide it over maybe a little bit. And you can see I made some notes from last week. I wanted to remember the colors that I was using. So this is my little bit of a note that I put on my tape. I am notorious for losing my notes, so I simply write it on my tape. If I've lost my tape, I've lost my whole painting. So I figure I'm not going to lose this if it's right on the painting itself. All right, so I'm going to carry on and just keep applying a little bit here. Rinse, blot. And I'm kind of walking up to it. I guess that's the way you could sort of describe it, as I'm walking up to that color with a damp brush. And that gives me a little bit more control. So that's good. Did anybody paint along with me last week? I'm just kind of curious if you are actually painting along with me. Now, I'm looking now at the other half of this leaf, and what I'm noticing is that the overall leaf has an arc, I guess, and it falls off this way and it falls off this way, as if it's on a cylindrical form, perhaps. And as I come around to the other half, what I'm noticing is that the shadow direction changes. So take a look here. Here it was definitely a crisp line at the bottom. Here the crisp line is at the top. So the shadow is actually going below the line. So it's very easy to go on autopilot when you're doing this sort of thing. and sort of get chatting with your friends or whatever the case may be, and lose track of where you are, and just start painting in things that really aren't there. So I'm going to mix a little bit more color here. I want it a little less watery. I just want to get a little bit more strength to my green. There goes the cerulean, and I'm going to put some cobalt in there as well. And I don't think I have enough yellow, so let's get a little more yellow in there. And dull it a little bit with that alizarin. That gives me a duller color, and it's also going to be a little bit darker. This is also going to give me some variations within this. Awesome. Yeah, so some of you are painting along. That's wonderful. Okay, so now I'm coming in and I'm going to be adding some of the other shadows in here. Rinse my brush, give it a blot, come right underneath. Now all of these little veins have little sort of subsidiaries where it is branching off, much like a branch. And I'm going to come back in to do those afterwards, because if I tried to do it now, I'll kind of obliterate the line that I just created. I'm going to reinforce some of this. I really do think that this one needs to be the deepest and the darkest. So you can certainly do this sort of thing twice. Rinse. Hopefully you can hear me rinsing my brush there. It's clean. The one thing I am not doing here is I'm not pulling out the color. I see a lot of beginners do this where they know that the color needs to go in this direction, like out, like in that direction. So they pull it out with their brush. But of course that always ends up with a crisp line. So that's not what you want to create, is another crisp line. A lot of brush marks and things like that. So come towards the damp color rather than pulling it out. Yeah, Patricia says, I find that paying close attention to the demonstrations and painting along later works best. That's a nice thing. All these demonstrations that I do, they are available afterwards. So, I mean, I love that you guys are here, that you're joining me live and that sort of thing. But you are certainly welcome to watch and paint along with the replays. It's different people like different ways of doing things, right? So some of you like to paint along, some of you like to catch up later. I'm going to come along. I see another little vein here. I don't know if I can get this on screen. But I'm looking at this little one here. So I'm coming down. I don't actually have this one drawn on here. I don't have every vein drawn on this as well. Rinse my brush and blot. And there's a very strong cast shadow right along this area here. This cast shadow here. It's probably from the stem of the trillium, or another trillium perhaps, but I'm ignoring that for now. I'm going to add that in later. So I'm just sort of pretending that's not even there. So I'm going to revisit now some of the first ones that I did, which are now dry, and I'm going to do those little subsidiaries. So they don't need to be as large as the main crease in the vein, in the leaf, but so not applying quite as much paint or big a area of paint. Remember, when you are softening something, it's a very light touch. You don't really need to press your brush hard or anything like that. I think that's one of the most difficult things I found when transitioning from acrylic to watercolor is the brush pressure. Don't hear a lot of people talk about brush pressure. I'd say that 10 times fast. But brush pressure can make a big difference in your watercolor. One of the reasons I do like these squirrel hair brushes is that they are so soft. Some of the synthetic brushes, you know, nylon and that sort of thing, can have a stiffer bristle. So you have to, and they're fine to use, but you do have to develop a light, delicate touch with them in order to get some of the effects that you might be looking for. And you'll notice I haven't connected it. Everything's not connected. They're kind of tapering off and that sort of thing. And I'll be doing some of that same sort of approach when it comes to the petals as well, but I'm just going to maybe speed up a little bit here. And I'm going to, there's actually quite a dark area right in here. So I'm going to, I believe this is the edge of the petal, or the leaf, I should say, because it is such a dark shadow. The other shadows aren't as dark, so I think this one might be another leaf underneath. And so I'm going to darken a lot of this area. So I'm going to need a little more color. I'm going to darken it with some neutral tint. Cobalt. Areolin is my yellow that I'm using, but if you don't have like an areolin, it's a very bright yellow. It seems weird that I'm making a really dark color with yellow, but I need it to be on the green spectrum, so I want to make sure I get that in there. Otherwise this will just look dark blue. The brush I'm using is a size 8. I think I'm going to put a little bit of the red into that as well, the alizarin crimson, because it's not a clean green. It's a little bit dulled down, so I'm going to dull it. So as I'm looking at creating these shapes, I'm also asking myself, yes, it's a dark value, but is it a brilliant strong color, or is it a dulled down color? So this one's a little bit more on the olive side. That's why I wanted to add in a little bit of that red. So I'm going to do each of these separately because there is kind of a crisp line here. It kind of gets hidden, yes, but at some point here it does need to be crisp. So I'm going to paint these areas separately. I'm filling up my brush again. I probably have enough to pull it out, stretch it out, but stretching it out will thin the color a little bit, and it'll give me crisp edges that could potentially cause brush marks and so on. So I'm going to just make sure all of this whole section stays wet at the same time. Let me move that up a bit. There we go. All right, so we have something really dark there, and I'm going to give this a very quick dry so I can, because I have the color mixed up, I'm going to dry this so that I can get the part next to it painted in. This is the only place I think that has a large dark area like this that I haven't already added in. And you can see that this dark here from the background, it's got a lot of red in it. Whereas what I just put down is most certainly more green. Even though they're very similar in value. This one might be a little bit darker, but very similar values. And but I have shifted the color. Okay, that should be pretty good. I'm going to let that cool down to room temperature again for a minute. And I will going to bring my palette over this time just so you hopefully can see it. I'm going to have to zoom out, I think, for you to see all of it. There we go. Okay, so this is my puddle that I made up, and I'm going to work on this little area here. And you're going to see instantly that this stem that's in there as well, it's way too bright at the moment. So I'm going to certainly have to darken that down as well. So here we go. There's a little light area peeking out there, so I'm going to paint around that. And I think I'm just going to go right through this whole stem for now because I still have to darken that a little bit. I'm almost out of color. That's dangerous because I have to mix on the fly here. I might have a different color, a little bit different. Going to blot my brush here and just get this worked right up into that stem. The stem I can add more color to, but my brush is rinsed a little bit here, so this is dark, but it's not quite as dark as like this little bit down here. I need to make sure it all stays equally wet if I don't want to have brush marks in it. So that's always the big secret, right? Keep it all equally the same moisture level. I want to soften a line right here, if I still can. This one right here. I don't know that I want that quite that bright there anyway. And you can see, even though I'm using this really dark color, I can still make out where that stem is. It's still visible. It's got a little bit of a reddish color to it. So I'm just, while it's wet, I think I'm just going to take some of that alizarin crimson, mix it into my mud there, because I don't need a bright color. I just need a little more reddish in that spot. I'm just going to add that in. So that area now has a little bit of, like, it's definitely in the shadows at this point. So with that little peekaboo window of light that's passing through. And now I'm going to carry on with some of my leaves over here. There is one cast shadow on here. I talked about this one last week. These are the form shadows. These are actually shadows made by the shape of the leaf. This one is something that is creating the shadow, something else that's creating a shadow. So that is a cast shadow there. So it's fuzzy, whereas these ones are very crisp. This one's really, really softened. So it's far away. When things get further away, the shadow they cast will be fuzzier. So I need to mix a little more green here. So let's get that on there. Got to put a little bit of that alizarin in, not as much as we did for that stem, of course, but I'm mixing a little bit in there. Maybe I can bring this over where you can see it. That would help, right? Means a little bit more picking up my palette, but that's okay. So I'm darkening it down. I've got a nice dark green. If I want to add a little more red to it, see, I've put some here, bring it over, adding it like salt to your dish, whatever you're making. Okay. So I think I'm going to start with maybe this main vein down the middle, which I haven't actually drawn on here. So let's draw this on here. I've got one right down the middle here. And there's another one over here somewhere. Just so I don't lose my way as I'm painting. And then we get to these veins start following the curve of the leaf. Not all leaves are like this. This is pretty similar, I guess, to a spinach leaf. At least in that regard. So that's a pretty dark vein right down here. So I'm gonna come in with a fairly substantial line. Give my brush a good rinse and a blot. Don't forget the blot. And I'm going to come along here. So the key here is to make sure that when you put this paint down, it stays wet long enough for you to be able to do what I just did there with the water. If it dries, if you put down very little color and it's, the paper grabs onto it and it soaks straight in, it won't have the opportunity to blend out the way I'm doing right now. So get your brush loaded up enough. Even though it's a small section, load it up enough that you can get the job done. And once again, I'm looking at which side of the line I am putting this shadow. So on this one, this half of this leaf is, the shading goes to the left. So I have my crisp line on the right-hand side, and my blended or my softened line is on the opposite side. You ever try to blend something and you get that telltale, oh, that's where I softened it, and it gives you that edge? It's because you're probably just going along with one brush, and it reached the other side of where you dampened, and therefore you ended up with another line, like a sort of a halo line on the outside. Okay, so unlike this leaf, the leaf here on the right, where the shadow direction changed, these are all consistently on the left side, so I can just carry on same way. I am intentionally not trying to make this not a perfect line. You can see, there's a little wonky bit in there where it dips down. So I'm really trying to not make it sort of man-made where it's, not natural. Nature has all kinds of little imperfections. put a little bit more in here. Rinse and blot. If the first layers, you know, if you're working along and you're painting this entire thing just sort of back to back, make sure that those under layers, you know, for the first washes that we put down like last week, make sure that those are fully dry when you start to put in some of this stuff. The faster you can execute this, the higher your success rate. Let me say that again. The faster you execute this step, this type of softening, the higher the success rate of getting a nice even wash. Now, the kiss of death is going to be going back into fiddle. I don't need to tell you that, do I? I know you've all done it. I just know it. It seems like it's a little more olive than I want, so I'm just going to put in a little bit more of my green. Just cleaning up my green a little bit. I must have hit my my mouse there because my screen went away. We're okay. We're still here. So, blotting my brush, softening this edge. You may notice something else that I've been doing, and that is that as I put in this color, let's say this little vein that I'm putting in here, I rinse my brush and I am wetting, I'm not wetting right next to it, I'm coming from further away, and then I touch it and let it sort of soften into my area that I've created that's damp. Alternately, you know, I mean, you could also soften the area first and then paint in the line, but I find that, you know, I don't always get the same amount of control when I do that. That could be just the way I'm painting, but for me, this method works better. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit. There's a little hint of this over here. It's not much. Just a little bit right here. It's a bit of a crinkle, I guess, in the leaf. All right, so I definitely need to have some more of the subsidiaries, those little veins that go in between. I'm just getting a little more color prepared here. I'm not really concerned that I didn't have all the color mixed up. I mean, it's not bad that I've didn't have enough color mixed up. I could mix it all up. One of the tendencies, though, is if you mix your big puddle and it's all prepared, then every stroke you make is the same color, like paint, like when you buy a green straight out of a tube kind of thing. So, oh, that was a little too much. Let's not mix that in. Some cerulean. My aureolin. Really have to clean my brush before I go back into my aureolin. And I'll grab in some of that red at the same time so it's not too pretty of a green. I want to dull it a little bit. And for darkening, I will just bring a little of that neutral tint. That's what I'm using, neutral tint, into this. I could also use Payne's Gray. That would also be an option there. Payne's Gray is more powerful though, so you've got to go easy with it. Doesn't get too overwhelmingly dark. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start introducing some of these little sections in here. Let's bring this right over onto the screen where you can see where I'm working. And I didn't draw any of this on, so some of this is just going to happen naturally. Sorry, I was just reading the chat a little bit. So I'm going to do a few of these. And you'll notice as I come down that I am going to sort of run it down and then along the vein as well. That will help make those feel more connected. If it just branches off like a mitered corner of some kind, it looks a little odd. So I'm also bringing that color down into the main crease there as I'm painting. And I am trying not to wet beyond where I'm going to be heading with my brush, because the next, if I wet too far out, what can happen is I could put my next stroke on and oops, I've hit a wet area. So there's sort of 3 or so there, and it really won't matter. I'm just going to put another one in here. Then I'll put a little gap. This one's a little shorter, and this is the running along, like running down, but then along the line, the main portion there. You must soften these as you go. You can't come back to them after they're dry. So if you want it to work successfully, you've got to soften as you go. Now there's some debris on these. I think I'm going to ignore that. I don't think I really need to have the little debris from the forest sitting on these leaves. And so I am making note of which side of the line that I need to soften. And it is only one side. All right, these ones are a little bigger, a little stronger. So down to the next row. That's my finger brush I just put in there. I'm also looking at the angle here. It's barely an angle there. It's not quite parallel. It just leans slightly down. So I'm really looking at the angle of this as well as I'm applying these little, I know there's a name for these two, these little sub veins. I just don't know what it is, so I'll call them little subsidiaries. If you find that, you don't like rinsing your brush all the time and remembering to blot, you could actually have another blotted brush available, right ready to go as you are applying these little veins. Okay, so now we got something a little different going on here. This one comes down a little funky there and kind of crisscrosses. What's going on with that? It's kind of crisscrossing. But that's what I see, so that's what I'm going to paint. Who am I to question nature? Might not have got that wet enough. Let's try again. Rinse, blot, soften. Okay, and I've got this one, and I'm going to put a few in here. They're really subtle, so I'm just going to not put very much color here. And these are all softened on the underside of these marks. Got to be fast with the damp brush. It's almost like one motion for me now. Like I just put the color on, rinse, blot, back to the painting kind of thing. I'll just put a few more of those in. Not too many here. They're very subtle. So I don't need a lot of color, but I do need a lot of wetness in order to soften it. So I've still got a fair bit in my brush, but I have to so that I have the opportunity to come back and soften that. If you are making these up, as I am right now, I don't have them all drawn on here kind of thing, pay attention to the spacing of these things. If you do them all equal, it doesn't look natural. It's that same old, right? We always tend to do that. Space things equally. I'm coming back over to this one for a moment because I want to put, I've got a darker vein down here that I haven't put in yet. Soften a little bit of this. Okay, so let's see how we're looking here. Okay, so the leaves are starting to feel like they have some detail in them, but I want to get this area down here a little bit darker. So I'm going to mix just a little more green. Playing around a little bit with all my ratios of yellow and blue and red. Sure teaches you a lot about color mixing when you keep a limited palette. It makes your painting consistent, harmonious, and it will just teach you a tremendous amount about your colors and how to mix them. All right, so I'm going to make sure this is dry before I do this because I don't want to disturb what I've done. I may revisit, I might strengthen some of these, but I'm going to press forward because I really want to get through this one in good time today. And as I'm adding this in, make sure that's cooled down. I don't want to be painting on hot paper here. So I'm going to put in some really wet color down in this corner. Rinse my brush. And come into that so that it's got this really sort of gentle thing, and it gives a little bit of a vignette effect where it's, you know, fading off into something darker. But I also have this cast shadow I still need to add on there. And for that, I'm going to dampen this area. Not this leaf, but I will dampen this area. Not too much brushing. As I'm wetting this area, I'm using the lightest possible touch because it's going to be, that's fresh paint, and I could very easily move that. So I want to be very careful of that. Now this cast shadow is fairly dark, and I also, because I'm going to be painting on a damp surface, I have to make sure that this puddle isn't sopping wet, or I'll have no control whatsoever. I don't want crisp lines, but I also don't want it to, that shadow to be obliterated. So I'm bringing in more color, a little less water. And it does seem to be kind of a bluish green for sure. So I'm going to put a little bit more red into that, just so it's not too pretty. All right, now you notice I blotted some of that off so that my brush isn't trapping a lot of extra water. You know, I rinsed between brushes, rinsed between colors and things like that. So it would have been very easy for a lot of that water to be trapped in my brush. So I'm looking at the shine on my paper, and it's nice and wet here, but it's not very wet here. So I need to come back. Some of this is already absorbed in. So I'm coming in with a little more water. And I'm leaning to one side. I'm waiting for the perfect shine on my paper. So what I'm looking for is like a satin shine. Not glossy, not dry. I'm looking for a uniform, glossy kind of sheen. And if in doubt, test somewhere where it's not going to be too noticeable. And actually, I think I'm in pretty good shape here. So this is going to come down. This is a nice strong shadow here. Doesn't have to be the same shape. It doesn't. It's a cast shadow, and we don't even know what's making the shadow, so it doesn't matter. Here, we'll put that cast shadow in there. And when the paper surface is the right, it's got that right shine, and practice will give you this. I mean, I can only describe what it is. I can't, I can't come to your house and show you. But, and it's not something that you can actually see when you're watching somebody do it. So I'm doing my best to describe what the paper surface looks like. If I bring the light over, if you can see any shine on this. I don't have all my lights in here because I'm jerry-rigging all this today. But maybe you can see a little bit of shine on the paper. Oh, it's a little bit there. Okay, you see a little bit of shine on the paper. And the paint that I put down, because this wasn't really wet, the paint is mostly where I've just set it, and it's getting really nice soft edges without any help from me. It's just the moisture on the paper. So keep that in mind if you are adding into a damp surface. So I'm going to revisit some of the leaves at the top, because next thing I'll want to do is I want to finish up all these veins, because I want to come in and add in those cast shadows. We've just put in our first one. These other cast shadows, these are obviously from things that are much closer, and so they have crisp, defined edges. I have a little bit more to do on this part of the leaf, so I'm going to be working right here to get some of those other veins in there. Rinse and blot. And another little bit right here. And then there's a sort of a crisscross thing going on here, a little something there. Some of these things are like super subtle, but it's those subtle things that you do to your painting sometimes are just what your painting needs. It's the one thing that might keep it from looking like it is a flat piece of paper and suddenly becoming a three-dimensional shape, or at least looking that way. So I'm just touching in a couple of spots here where I've missed a bit of color. So just touching that in. And I'm going to do some of these veins that are up on this part here. And these ones are a little softer, so I might take my paint and just make sure I don't have too much strong color in there. If I want to keep the veins looking subtle and soft, I can make sure that I am using a little bit more diluted color. And once again, we've got this kind of an S shape with these little subsidiary veins. If it needs more color, you can drop it in before it dries. Look at me spacing everything evenly. They are pretty even actually, even in the reference, but I'm going to start mixing that up just to make this look more natural. And I notice a change in direction here as well. I'm softening the left side, keeping the right side as a crisper line. And these leaves, if you're doing them realistically, they can take quite a while to build up. And after this live stream ends, there's a very good chance that I'm going to come in and fiddle a little bit more to get it more to, a higher level of realism, perhaps. But I want to make sure that I get through all of this for you. I don't want to be skipping over things. Just know that I might fiddle a little bit, like I might reinforce or darken a color here and there, soften an edge, but I won't do anything different. I'm not going to, pull a fast one on you and really do something that I never explained. It's all going to be here. So I'm going to dry this because I want to do this little outer vein, which I obviously didn't get in last week. I have paint all over my table. I don't know what I splashed here, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. All right. So I want to come in along this funny little line that just seems to disappear, so I don't even know where it ends. But and this is the edge I want to soften, this lower edge. All right, so that helps to start to show that puffy quality, that quilted quality to the leaves. Okay, so I'm going to give this a dry, and I'm going to start putting these cast shadows on because I think these cast shadows make a really big difference. I am actually noticing a very, very subtle, soft cast shadow here, I believe. I could put that on, but I might do that later. It'd be just the same as this one down here. I might as well dry that. It's wet. Okay, guess what I'm doing? I'm mixing more green. Lots and lots of green here. So I'm going to take my Aureolin, cobalt blue. Need more blue for sure. So definitely a darker color I'm going into here. I'm going to use a little bit of cerulean in there too. I just threw a little too much in there. So I'm going to make some more. Dull it with a little bit of that alizarin crimson. And you'll notice whenever I add a complementary color to my color mixing, I'm setting it off to the side to just go straight from my color right into my green mixture. I could kill the whole color. And then I've got a big puddle that I have to keep making bigger and bigger. So I can add a little in at a time. I'm going to bring in a little cobalt. And now I want to darken this. So I'm going to go with a little neutral tint here. Neutral tint is a great color. I think that it's a softer color than Payne's Gray. But Payne's Gray, you could add Payne's Gray. You're just going to have to be real sparing with it. More so than the neutral tint. So I want a darker color for sure. So that's giving me a good dark color here that I can use for some of my cast shadows. And I'm looking in particular at this dark one up here, this one here, and this funny shape down here. So I'm right-handed, which means I'm going to start up here. And so I don't put my hand in wet paint, and off we go. I'm going right along the edge there, and it's very similar in value, but it is a different color. And hopefully a lot of this veining will show through. I'm not sure if it will or not, but I'm going to try. And I'm putting it on in such a way that it's going to be nice and wet and therefore uniform. It won't have brush marks in it, even though I'm making I'm kind of brushing with it lightly. I am not going to end up with brush marks because it's all equally wet. And sometimes this is one of the reasons I absolutely love taking photos of flowers that are in sunshine, is because it gives me these wonderful cast shadows, the high contrast. And, I've said it before, I'm a drama queen and I just love that contrast. So I love having these strong shadows in here. They can make a huge difference. If you want your highlights to look light, you need the contrast of darkness. So these dark values really help with that. Just because it's a dark value doesn't mean it's not wet. You can see I can touch in spots into this. I'm not really looking for spots, but I can touch into that. It is wet enough that I can flow my paint into there without any difficulty. I have to be really careful as I come up to the edge of the sepal here. Really get up on the tiptoe of my brush. It's really wet color, so I really have to use the tip of the brush to get into this little slivery corner here. I put my knuckle in it. There we go. So I really need to get up. And at this point, if you're coming into a really tight spot like that, go ahead and blot a little of the color off the brush if you really need to get your brush to a nice point. But get your brush handle up straight and you will get those nice points more easily. So there's a couple of cast shadows. Now when you put one in, it doesn't look great, but then you put in more and oh, that makes more sense. And it just kind of comes together. Nice wet color. And I think this is the one thing that confuses a lot of new painters is the amount of color that you can put in a wet puddle. You can put a ton of color in a wet puddle. And I think that, people feel that they can't get dark color. Some of the reasons you might not be getting your dark color is the color choices you've used. But mostly just it's the amount of color you've put into that wet puddle. There we go. Okay, so now we see some really strong cast shadows there. We've got this subtle one here. I'm going to dry this and I'm going to work a little bit on the flower itself. I think maybe I might just take a little bit of color just to darken some of this in here. this is what I mean. Like I may come back later on after the live stream ends. I might come in and take some time, really slow it down, and strengthen a few of these. 'Cause once you get some of the darks in there, you realize, oh, there's a little bit of an imbalance, and these ones need to have a little more strength to fit in properly. Soften some of that. And I've got a little bit more, this is a little bit more of a golden green, I guess, in here. Really looking for subtle changes in some of these greens. I think that can be a real nice thing to be including, is variations in your greens. And last week I used a little dry brush right in here, so I'm going to do some more dry brush right there. That's a blotted brush, just skimming gently the surface of the paper. And you can see that shadow is now a lot stronger just by my doing that. Okay. As I said, I could take my time later and fiddle with a lot of those things. But I need to dry this because I just put my hand in it again. I really don't put my hand in it all that much when I'm painting on my own. just so you know. And after these cast shadows go on, if I feel like the cast shadows have obliterated any of my my little vein work in here or something, I can reinforce that. But most of the time, even if I put down a fairly strong color, some of that original veining still shows through. Okay, so this is still a little damp down here, so I do think I need a little bit more drying right here. Okay, so now I want to work on the Trillium. That means it's time for me to clean all my stuff. Clean my brushes, clean my water, clean paper towel even. So I'm going to leave this here because I'm probably going to use it again. But I will be using some of the colors, color mixes in other areas. So other areas of my palette, that is. So I'm going to rinse this out. This was really hard for me to wait all week just to finish this. I've been looking forward. I've been looking at it all week, just itching to pull it off the wall and start painting it again. So okay, so I've got a very, very wet and dirty paper towel, so that goes. I've got some paint water that needs refreshing. There we go, nice and clean again. And couple of clean paper towels. That's because I don't want any of this green inadvertently getting into my Trillium petals and dirtying things up. So clean dry paper towel ready to go. I'm going to just wipe out my palette a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so did I happen to tell you why there are no lines on the third petal? This one. I'm guessing you're talking about this one. Or the petal. Sorry, the petal here. Yeah, I just I stopped last week. we got to the 2-hour mark and I went, oh boy, mostly what I had put in on this one was the strong shadows. So as I did these ones, the strong shadows were pretty dominant. Like this was a wide line here. These ones are really subtle. So these ones are more directly in the light, so they are not showing up as much. So our color combination, cerulean blue. I have it marked down here. I've got some cobalt, permanent alizarin crimson, and gamboge, a nice egg yolk kind of yellow. So I used that. And that's my colors I'm going to use. I may need to bring more out, but I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I'm going to mention it now. Before we started today, before I went live, I softened up all of my paints, and I tell people this all the time, and it's something that's really easy to forget, right? You want to have rich color. Now, we're not looking for rich color at this moment, but if you are looking for rich color, like some of these darks that we put in the background here and so on, those can't happen unless you have softened up paint or paint squeezed fresh out of the tube. So these are softened up to the point where they are now soft enough that I could take a palette knife. Here's a standard palette knife. I can plunge this into this paint all the way to the bottom of the well. And I've got a fair bit of paint in there. So if I take this and I can push it right down, I can touch the bottom. It's gooey enough that I can do that. And all my paints are gooey. I can scoop these up right out of the well, the whole thing, right? It's all gooey and soft, and that's going to give me rich color. You can't get rich color when you have dried wells. And I had a beginner project the other day that I was doing, and somebody said that one tip was a game changer for her. So that's good feedback. It tells me that I need to mention these things, because there's so many things we do without really consideration. It's not that you're, forgetful. Maybe nobody ever told you that. So, all right. So into our veins. Now we're going to start breaking down some of these areas here. I don't think I have a whole lot more I need to do on this upper petal, and this one's in pretty good shape too, but I'm going to take some of my blues and I'm going to dull it down a little bit, take a little bit of that alizarin crimson, mix it in, and maybe I'll do this one right here so I don't put my hand in it. So I don't want this too bright. It's a subtle vein, so I'm going to not use too much color. And it's going to come right up and right through this cast shadow. Rinse, blot, and get in there to soften that before that dries. Really subtle stuff. All right, so let me zoom in for the next one now that you've seen the color mixing and all of that. Oh, actually, there's no color mixing. I just did a little puddle here with these two and a touch, just a little bit of this. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see the rest of this a little closer, the little nuances. Okay, so I'm zoomed in quite a bit, so hopefully the camera stays focused on the page and not my hand, but it's automatic, so it's kind of hard. Let's try first one here. There's one point, let me just show this. There's one point here where it's like, oh, the line is almost disappeared, right? There's so much light hitting that directly, it's filling in all shadow. So it's not until the curving part that you actually start to see those little subtle veins. So it's a start and then stop and then start again. And I'm starting again just before the shadow. Rinse and blot my brush, and let's get this softened. And again, this is another instance where I haven't really drawn it onto my paper, because drawing it on there, it will surely show. I mean, if you have a drawing on here, the pencil lines are going to be very prominent. Rinse and blot quick so that you can get these edges softened. Trying to taper that off as well as I can. And then we have a little bit of ruffle happening. So this one I'm really sort of fanning out a little bit, because there's a little bit of a, see that little bump there on the edge? That tells me that there's a dip in this petal. Softening some edges again. Silly, that should have gone right along the edge of that. Wipe that one out. Little subtle veins there, just with really diluted color. Softening wherever I can. blot my brush and soften this again. And you'll notice sometimes here I'm making like a wedge, and that's where there's a dip in the ruffle at the edge. So here, for example, there might be a little bit extra shadow because that dips a bit. Very little detail that you can see through here. It's like uber subtle, like really hard to see. But you needed something, right? Like you obviously saw this a minute ago when it had nothing in there, and it clearly needed something. Just darkening this a little bit more. Now let me zoom out a little bit so that you get the overall effect. It's super subtle. Not a lot of color in this. When I'm mixing up my paint here, it's pretty watery color, diluted color that I'm putting down so that it will, I'll be able to soften it out, and it's there, but it's not in your face. It's pretty delicate stuff. All right, so on to, I don't even really want to do a lot more on the petals. I think I'm happy with the petals, so I'm going to leave them alone. So I'm going to talk about this part here. Now, this is it's like it's in a little cup. So in order for us to feel like we're actually going into the flower, we need to create a little bit more depth in here. So for this, I'm going to take my gamboge, that's that nice egg yolk yellow, and I'm going to introduce more of the alizarin crimson into that. It's going to become a little bit more orange. Not completely orange, it's definitely more of a golden yellow as opposed to egg yolk. So I want to come in and start defining. Now I haven't changed brushes. You certainly could at this stage, but I haven't changed brushes, and I'm going to work on the tip of this, because the point on this brush, come into focus camera, the point on this brush, pretty much the same as the point on a tiny brush. So they're both points, right? So if I use the point of the brush, I can come in and really start to emphasize the shapes in here. So what I'm doing, I did a line, blotting my brush, and I'm just going to soften this a little bit. I'm going to come in with a little bit more of the same. Got a fair bit of color in this mix. This is the heart of the flower, so therefore I really want to have a little bit more impact here. And I'm just blotting quickly and softening edges as I'm going along. And it's a really delicate procedure because it's a very tiny area, and I don't want it all hard edges. I do want some softening. Some of you might say, oh, nuts to this. I'm not very good at the softening after that's something you could practice. You should practice because, at some point you're going to need to do it. But an alternative would be to take an area, dampen it like this, and then come in with your color. And it will automatically soften. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. My camera keeps wanting to focus on my hand instead of what I'm doing, but Zoom out just a little bit, see if that helps. There we go. A little bit more in focus, a little further away, kind of like getting older, right? Got to hold it a little further away for it to come into focus. I guess cameras are a little bit the same. So I'm going to just keep going here with some of these stamen in the middle, really punching them up. And there's going to be one or two things I'm going to do at the very end that's really going to make this feel a little deeper. All right, let's soften some of this. I'm going to go in just gamboge here, just to want to get that a little stronger in some places. And let's soften that in. Now we had done some of the that glow from the middle, but I'm going to punch that up a little bit more because that's going to make this feel deeper, and it's going to make it feel like, yeah, there's some real glow happening here. So I'm coming in and around some of this with some quite wet color. If I don't make it wet enough, I won't be able to soften it. So rinse, blot. And starting out here, I'm going to come in and hit that color so that it softens right in. That really has some glow now. I'm going to come in, it's even coming over into this part of the petal. I'm going to soften that in too. All right, so I'm going to dry this. Even though it's yellow, yellow doesn't have to be a weak and wimpy color. Sometimes it can be bold and brilliant. So don't be afraid to put a bit of color down there. Okay, so there's sort of one final thing I want to get in here, and that is just a couple of pockets of dark. You see that, you know, right in here, you get that little dark in there, a little dark in there, and maybe a little bit extra along the edge of this this petal here where one is overlapping the other one. So I want to get that a little bit stronger. So I'm going to take the colors I've been using, my cerulean, some of my cobalt, get some of the alizarin crimson in there. That's going to make it darker. And that is a dark, but it is a wet color. All right. So this is, you can see it's pretty wet. So I'm going to come along the edge of this petal first. I need to quickly rinse and blend that in because it looks ridiculous otherwise. So I have to come in and really soften that. So I'm laying the brush down, getting that softened in. So it's giving me a nice sort of crisp, clean line, but it's also elevating this petal. It's creating a shadow on the next one, so therefore it's elevating this one. Now there's a little pocket of dark right in here, so I want to get that in there. And this is almost a purple that I'm using because the purple is the complement to yellow, and it's a little bit darker. And sometimes just those little, almost insignificant marks create enough contrast that it creates volume for what's there. So it shows that these are pockets, right? And I'm going to soften that in a little bit. This is like a tiny thing that I'm talking about here, but it's sometimes just those little tiny things that are this just sort of the chef's kiss of detail, right? Just a little bit of something extra. And that makes those feel like little cheesies, if you will. I don't know if you have cheesies in the US or in other parts of the world, but cheesies are like little cheese puffs, and that's what they look like. So let's pull out here, and I'm pretty satisfied with this. I might darken some of these things, as I mentioned, so I'll come back to some of my greens maybe, and even though it's a dark color, I'm going to come in with it really wet so that I can strengthen a bit of this. This is where I soften things. Clean things up, you know, I can do a number of additions and hopefully not a lot of subtraction, right? So when I say additions or subtractions, I'm talking about corrections. So, or adjustments. Maybe I should call them adjustments, not corrections, but the addition of certain values can help clean up a lot of your painting. It's surprising. You know, I may revisit a couple of these veins, for example. Like this one could be a little stronger. That one could be a little stronger. And sometimes when you make some of these shadows stronger, it makes the lights look like the sunshine look stronger. So I can easily come in and make a lot of these little adjustments that I want to. The thing, and I usually end up having to do some of these because despite my best efforts, sometimes things just dry lighter than you want. So softening. I did get a little bit of a blossom happening actually in my leaf here. I don't mind it. I think I could leave it and it would be no problem whatsoever. But if you have a blossom, let me just talk quickly about this because I know some of you are perfectionists and you cannot leave it alone. I am a recovering perfectionist, shall we say. Let me zoom in a little bit here so I can show you this blossom. Okay, so you can see it. I'm going to follow it with my brush right here. Right? And that was because I wet the area to put this shadow on, but it made a bit of a blossom in the process. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dampen and touch, and there's hardly any paint in or any moisture in my brush at all, just a little bit. So all I'm doing is I am touching where the excess paint is, and that's all I'm lifting up. I'm not going to try to wash over everything again. I'm very good chance I'm going to create a new blossom. So I'm just lifting the excess color. Hopefully you can see that it's just the tip of my brush touching this little part here, and blot with my paper towel as I go. And we'll see if I can disguise this blossom here. They're, little blossoms in your watercolors, they're not the end of the earth. With so much AI running around the internet these days, that's one telltale sign that it's an original. But it's also sometimes creates a little visual interest as well. So I'm not, I'm over the perfectionism, I think. I'm still pretty fussy, but as for making it perfect, I think I'm kind of getting over that. So I would happily come in and reinforce a few things. I might want to put a little bit of shading, for example, right along this little bit here. I think that could be a little stronger. Rinse and blot my brush and just soften that. And, all these little attention to detail, that's going to be the time-consuming part of this. So I'm not going to keep you here till 1 o'clock today doing this, but I've shown you what you can do. So let me zoom out. Why does it look so pink? It just looks kind of weird. But anyway, let's take off this tape. Normally I would leave the tape on, but it sure looks a lot better to, at the end of a project, to take this tape off. Get a nice clean border going all the way around. And this is going to end up just ever so slightly bigger than a 12 by 12. And so I'll be able to mount this onto a 12 by 12 wood panel, apply some Dorland's wax medium over it so I don't have to use glass, and that way I can put it on display like in a gallery setting and not worry about glass or glare or breakage or any of that other stuff that doesn't seem to be very popular nowadays. So I am finding that I am doing more and more of the wax medium for that reason. It eliminates the need for matte, for one thing, but also the obstruction of glare and glass in front of your painting. Glass actually has a little bit of a blue color to it, so it will ultimately tint your painting a bit. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for all the subscribes, the likes, and all of those things that you guys are sending my way over the years. I've been doing these live demos since COVID, and I'll probably continue until you stop showing up, and then I won't come either. But anyway, I hope you all have fun painting this. Have a super week, and we will see you again next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.